If you prepare yourself or the camera finally to shoot a long series of LDRs, low dynamic range images, then you should have pretty much any automatic set to off, except of course the auto bracketing function. If you have a function that is called AF or AV, that means that you set a time and the camera set then, based on the measurements and aperture value, an f-stop, then this automatic function would change a lot in your system, of course, and we will see this in the next episode. That is, of course, a different animal. When you have everything beyond the hyperfocal point, that means when the depth of field has no influence to the sharpness of the image, which would be the case if you just take an fisheye, for example, and you shoot the sky with it. Then it might be possible that you mix the functions. We will discuss this in detail, not the sky by itself, but which dependencies each of these methods have. But for a normal shooting where you have things pretty close to the camera or in an area where the depth of field is critical in terms of distance, shut the auto f-stop function to off. The next is, of course, then that we don't want to have an auto white balance set to on. It should be set to off. The reason is when you photograph, for example, a panorama, then you photograph maybe one time around your own axis, or the lens nodal point in this case, one time around 360 degrees. So you shoot sometimes in the direction of the sun, if the sun is not on high noon position, and then you shoot exactly in the opposite direction. There is also the chance that some color in a scene triggers the white balance to a certain degree. In the moment you shoot HDRI and maybe a panorama, this could change dramatically when something happens during your exposure series. So measure what you want to have first in terms of white balance, what you need, which mood you have to preserve in a picture, and shut the auto white balance to off. One big enemy in HDRI is, of course, the autofocus. This needs to be set to off as well. Sometimes maybe even a little butterfly close to the camera could trigger that. And then you have one exposure in a long series of exposures focused to the butterfly. And that maybe just for one image. Not very funny, to be honest. Maybe not really visible, but if you want to have high quality, shut this off, find the right focus point, and you have a stable result. Inside of many DSLR cameras, you can set some values, some parameters. That these shouldn't be very strong is clear, and my suggestion is that there should be no sharpening, because sharpening changes the image along borders, and based on your exposure series that can change a lot, because each image would have a different sharpening, because pictures go into the dark, go into the white, and then they don't have sharpening there. But in the middle field where the edges are very visible, they get a lot of sharpening. You want to have each and every image from the exposure series in the same quality and not something changed in only a specific part of this series. You can sharpen images always later, and I encourage you, because the calculation among all these pixels should be done on the raw information, which is of course not included in this. RAW has normally no sharpening in it, it's only metadata so far then. But if you have the idea to shoot with JPEG. Same for this separation, RAW and JPEG, no extra saturation. Don't do this. You can saturate later if the image really needs it. But go with a neutral setting into the game, and if you shoot with RAW, this is not really something you should think about it, but JPEG is affected from that. The contrast I would always recommend at least set it to 0. I should mostly below 0 to get a more or less flat picture, because any extra contrast that is set in the picture, if you use JPEG for example, which I do sometimes for not important stuff, will change of course the whole calculation as well. But normally application can filter this out, but the quality goes down, because you get more pixels on one side, as we have seen in previous episodes, and in some areas you get more horizontal line in the graph or more vertical line in the graph, you remember? And if you have any kind of picture style or something similar in your camera as option, set this to neutral, because that would influence your picture as well. So you end up with a camera that needs pretty much all your attention for everything, because there's no automatic except for the auto bracketing if you use this, and so you should know your camera, and then you get very good results, better than that some automatic thinks it does something very well and destroys your work partly or completely. Thanks for listening. In the next part we go a little bit deeper into the shooting techniques. See you there.